3 bone-chilling true home intrusion horror stories that haunt you at midnight. The night was thick with tension, shadows twisting inside the houses, stretching like fingers reaching for something dark. In the small suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek, 3 families would never sleep soundly again, haunted by encounters nobody would believe. Late-night whispers, heavy footsteps, and ominous creaks made the air electric. The kind of night where anything could lurk just beyond the door, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. The first chilling tale belonged to the Jacobsons, a family who had just settled into their new home. They discovered a door in the basement, marked with rust and a strange, pulsating energy. One fateful night, they heard a soft tapping, like nails scratching against wood. It grew louder, building to a crescendo that echoed off the barren walls. They traded nervous glances, hearts pounding, until Greg, the eldest son, mustered up the courage to investigate. With each cautious step, terror brewed in his chest. What he found would shake them to their core: a hidden room filled with old photos of their home, featuring previous families in unsettling situations, eyes blackened out, and mouths twisted in silent screams. Then there was the Henderson family. They found strange symbols carved into their porch. Intriguing yet unnerving, those markings whispered of rituals lost in time. One evening, as they sat watching TV, a chill swept through the room. The screen flickered, fading to static before a whisper, soft as a breath, floated through the air. "Get out!" it wrapped around them, turning their blood to ice. They bolted outside, but all they could sense was the growing darkness, as if the night itself was breathing down their necks. Lastly, the Robinsons awoke one night to the eerie sound of their dog, Max, barking frantically. They rushed to the living room, where a silhouette stood at the window, silhouetted against the moonlight. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. But the unsettling part? The lock had not been tampered with. They looked at each other, every hair on their necks standing on end. What had they just witnessed? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As the night grew deeper, the 3 families would soon find their stories entwined. Echoes of their fears resonated through the neighborhood, stirring an ancient evil that thrived on secrets and shattered safety. What were those dark figures lurking in the corners of their homes? What sinister history tied their fates together? These questions hung in the air, thick and tangible, like smoke curling from a dying fire, begging to be answered. The next night, the air was thick again, a suffocating shroud cloaking Willow Creek. Streetlights flickered like dying fireflies, casting shaky light on the cracked pavement. Each family, lost in their own turmoil, felt an involuntary pull towards the darkness surrounding their homes. In the Jacobson household, Greg couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Chills ran down his spine as he sat on his bed, replaying the horror of the hidden room. What if those photos tell a story? A story about us, he thought, unease pooling in his gut. Gathering courage, he crept back to the basement, armed with nothing but a flashlight, the beam a fragile barrier against the night. As he descended the steps, the chill in the air thickened. Shadows danced, flickering with the beam of his light. The door loomed ahead, and despite his racing heart, he pressed forward. Slowly, he turned the knob, the rusted hinges squealing in protest, revealing the room that haunted his dreams. Heart pounding in his chest, he stepped inside, the air heavy with dust and dread. To his horror, missing from the wall were the photos. Instead, a new creation awaited him: a mirror covered with a thin layer of grime, reflecting nothing but the void behind him. He wiped it with trembling fingers, gasping as whispers filled his ears. Join us. Just a few blocks away, the Hendersons were glued to their couch, panic-stricken after their earlier flight into the night. The television buzzed softly, seemingly harmless until the lights flickered and the familiar whisper returned, more sinister this time. "You are not safe." A shudder coursed through them, leaving a lump of anxiety lodged in their throats as they squeezed each other's hands, searching for comfort. "Do you hear that?" Jenna, the mother, whispered, eyes darting to the dark corners of their living room. They strained to listen, the world outside beyond their windows dimming into ominous silence. The scratching began, a slow crawl like insect legs scuttling against the floor, creeping closer, until it abruptly stopped. Outside, the Robinsons huddled by their window, a mixture of disbelief and fear pooling in their eyes. "Max is acting strange again," Paul said, unable to contain the tremor in his voice. The Great Dane paced nervously, sniffing towards a shadow lurking just beyond the door. He barked again, a deep, throaty growl emanating from within, setting the hairs on their arms on end. "What does he see?" Rachel murmured, eyes wide with fear. The lock was secure. How could there be something out there? As they considered their next move, a sudden crash echoed through the night, followed by the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. It was a wake-up call none of them could ignore. They exchanged frantic glances, each of them silently debating whether to run or hide. Then, without warning, the power went out. The house was swallowed by darkness, illuminated only by the soft, flickering flashlights they hastily grabbed. "Stay close," someone whispered in the break of the silence, but the thumping from the basements grew louder now. A frigid breeze swept through, wrapping its fingers around them, making their breath visible in the dark. Panic surged as they realized the true significance of their experiences. They weren't just victims anymore. They were prey. As the three families prepared for whatever horror lurked in the shadows, a feeling of dread settled over Willow Creek. They were on the cusp of a revelation that could bind them together forever or seal their fates in darkness. Then, a laugh echoed through the silence, chilling them to the bone, and the voice of a child rang out, "You didn't listen, now it's time to play." What on earth had they invited into their lives, and could they escape before it was too late? The laughter faded into a whisper, dancing around the rooms like a mischievous spirit. Shadows flickered from the flashlight beams. Women gasped, men clenched their fists. Their small haven had become a stage for something beyond their understanding, and the air crackled with unspoken fear. Greg stood paralyzed in the basement, cold fear snaking down his spine as he stared at the mirror. What had he unearthed? The whispers grew louder, wrapping around him with a cold, familiar embrace. Join us," each echo felt like icy fingers tightening around his throat. His breath quickened. The door behind him felt like a barricade against his freedom. Meanwhile, in the Henderson household, Jenna's heart raced with each flicker of the lights. What if it's the kids? What if they're playing a prank? She pleaded. But even she didn't believe it. Not anymore. The scratching continued, growing more sinister, and she couldn't help but imagine what or who was on the other side. Call the police," her husband, Phil, stammered, swiping his phone out and feeling the encroaching shadow of dread when there was no signal. "Something's wrong," the words tumbled out, but his voice trembled, each syllable cracking under the weight of their reality. Just a few streets over, the Robinsons grappled with the chaotic tension in their home. Paul turned to Rachel, desperate eyes scanning the room the way Max surveyed the creeping darkness outside. "You heard it too, right? We're not imagining this, it's happening." Rachel's gaze fluttered to the shattered glass, and she fought to suppress the rising panic that threatened to choke her. "We have to get out now." But just as she made a move toward the door, another crash not far from them this time reverberated through the night, making the walls shudder as if they, too, were afraid. "Max!" Paul yelled, grabbing for the dog as the Great Dane growled, a sound deep and primal, warning them of intruders. "Stay back!" He barked at the door as if it could answer. Just then, the air shifted. A dense stillness crept into the atmosphere, silencing even the most timid of hearts. Each family clustered closer together, fingers clutching hands, arms linked in a desperate fortress against what lay beyond, but it was under that stillness that a new fear arose, a feeling like eyes watching. Greg, still in his basement, suddenly felt the mirror's pull stronger. It was more than reflective glass, it pulsed with an energy that beckoned him to cross its sinister threshold. What if a thought formed, raw and fragile? What if it's not just a mirror? A crash echoed again, but this time it came from above. The structure groaned, vibrating through the families like a major quake, as if the very foundations of Willow Creek were under siege. "Go!" Rachel whispered fiercely, pushing Paul and Max toward the back door. The wood splintered under an unseen force, slamming ominously as shadows flickered outside their window. In that moment, a voice, familiar and yet foreign, filled the air, a child's voice, a joyful giggle layered with a menace that dripped promises of terror. "Playtime 1T, wait, let's see who's first to join." The families were locked in a battle against time, fear clenching tighter than fist. Decisions had to be made, alliances forged and broken. Could they save each other while fighting the darkness enveloping Willow Creek? As they stumbled toward what they hoped was safety, blood coursed with adrenaline, and the air charged with an electrifying urgency. Suddenly, the lights blinked back to life, but not in the comforting glow they expected. They illuminated a scene that stole their breath. Figures emerged, distorted shapes with wide grins, eyes glistening in the darkness, stepping into the light. It was not just a prank anymore. They had awakened something far more dangerous. Had they opened a doorway they could never close? The laughter faded into a hushed reverence, an echo of that sinister giggle lingering like a ghostly presence. As the figures emerged, flickering with the lights, a chill swept through the room. Greg, caught between terror and intrigue, felt spellbound, as if the mirror's reflection was no longer just a reflection but a gateway to madness. The figures glided closer, unnaturally fluid, their smiles grotesque masks of delight mingling with shadow. One stepped forward, a girl twisted in misplaced innocence, with eyes that flickered like candles caught in a storm. "Are you here to play?" she asked, her voice sweet, yet tinged with something dark. Greg's heartbeat thundered in his ears. No, I'm not playing," he stammered, stepping back into the wall, desperate to escape the suffocating air thick with dread. But there was no escape, only the glass, the unfathomable abyss glinting behind the children. Meanwhile, the tension escalated in the Henderson home. Jenna's brow furrowed, her instincts screaming like sirens. "There's something out there," she hollered, staring at the chaos unfolding outside. The flickering shadows raced like phantoms, and a chilling wind began to howl, rattling windows. Every instinct urged her to flee, but they were paralyzed. Shadows of fear tightened around their hearts. Outside, in the Robinsons' home, the darkness pulsed. Paul clutched Rachel's hand so tight it was like a lifeline. What if it's not just a prank? What if they want something, or someone? The weight of his words hung heavy, suffocating. The dog, Max, whimpered, ears flattening as he sensed the wrongness swirling in the air. Rachel, trembling, whispered, "We can't stay. We have to go," but every instinct pulled her to stay rooted. What awaited them out there? As they huddled, the lights above began to blink erratically. The brightness sliced through the shadows, casting frantic silhouettes against the walls. Then silence, utter, oppressive silence. It felt thicker than fog, an unimaginable blanket wrapping around them. The unsettling quiet became a punctuation of fear as they dared not breathe. In that moment of paralyzing stillness, a monstrous crack split through the void. The front door burst open, splintering wood fanning out like broken bones. They staggered back, hearts leaping as a shadowy figure loomed, framed in the doorway. It was a figure resembling their own reflection, mimicking Paul's features but twisted, exaggerated, mocking. Jenna shouted, "Get back!" as a pale arm shot forward, brushing the threshold. Unseen wind swept into the room, chilling everyone to the bone. The creature grinned wider, toothy and horrifying. "We just want to play." Across the street, Greg's knees buckled as the girl drew nearer, her eyes dark wells of mischief, gleaming with malice. The whispers grew louder. "Join us forever." He staggered to the mirror, his instincts screaming to look away, but he couldn't. The beauty of the horrific danced in front of him. What are you? The question tumbled out, almost pleading. As if in response, the image in the mirror shimmered. A montage of past horrors unfolded, a string of families lost, drawn into the depths, each finding their way into the shadowy embrace of the smiling figures. A soul donning its own reflection, forever imprisoned in torment. Panic crashed over him like a wave. An insatiable dread fueled his flight instincts, yet he was trapped in the mirror's grasp, unable to turn away. Chilled voices whispered, "You will play with us too." Suddenly, Greg felt a distinct shift. As if the mirror was more than glass, more than a reflection. It was hunger. A call to darkness, weaving through time, space, and choice. Help. His voice cracked, but it trembled against the laughter, a chorus spiraling into madness. The family stood at the precipice of terror, tangled in a web they hadn't even seen spun around them, and somewhere, deep in the shadows, the true horror waited. What would happen if the last barrier between them and the darkness faded? Would anyone survive to tell the tale, or would they disappear, leaving only echoes of their laughter behind? The answer loomed, chilling and inevitable. The air thickened with dread as every heartbeat echoed loudly, almost mocking Greg's growing desperation. He could feel the mirror pulling at him, its depths swirling with promises too dark to comprehend. The grotesque children, now just a breath away, regarded him with predatory delight. "Stay with us and play," the girl cooed, her voice a sickly sweet melody that mingled with the booming laughter still bouncing around the room. "We're just like you, but we're home now." Greg's throat ran dry as terror choked him. The mirror, a curse masquerading as a portal, promised joy in exchange for something far more precious. He was paralyzed, unable to look away from the swirling shadows that mesmerized him. Across the street, Paul and Rachel stood frozen, their worst fears creeping into reality. The twisted figure stood in their doorway, mocking their every move, mimicking their expressions captured in duplicitous reflection. Paul's grip on Rachel's hand tightened, threatening to cut off circulation, but he needed the anchor. "Just leave us alone," Rachel shouted. The words pierced the stillness but were quickly drowned by another wave of laughter that seemed to resound from nowhere. Suddenly, the lights flickered. It was a brief flash, but in that fleeting moment, the array of shadows shifted. They grew thicker, darker, and more menacing, stretching outward like grasping tendrils. Jenna felt a rush of thoughts crashing through her. How could they fight this? Shadows weren't meant to roar. In the mirror, Greg was caught in a terrifying dance between two realities. He could see the children behind him, watching with hungry eyes, while the faces of the lost family spun behind in an agony of silent screams. "I don't want to play," he whispered, almost to himself, his voice a fragile wisp. Unseen forces pressed against him, sinister, relentless. They resumed their taunting whisper, "But you will. Just look deeper." Desperate, he spun around, searching for anything that could pull him back, anything to sever the invisible connection binding him to that dreadful mirror. But the laughter escalated, creating a deafening symphony that drowned out his thoughts. Across the street, Paul shouted, "We have to get out. Now." He tugged at Rachel, but the atmosphere felt as if the very house had sunk its teeth into them, holding them hostage. She shook her head, terror strobing across her face. "What if they follow us? What if they want us to run?" There was no answer as shadows outside danced closer, their whispers weaving into a cacophony, a promise and a threat. "Join us, don't run." Just then, a creaking sound pierced through the spiraling panic. A figure emerged from the darkest corner of the room, an echo of Paul but twisted, a masquerade of familiarity, its eyes hungry, filled with a depthless hunger. "We'll play forever." In that moment, realization struck him. The mirror wasn't just another haunted object, it was a gateway to something far beyond this world, a collector of souls, children lost in joyless eternities, denied the light of day. A surge of adrenaline pushed Greg into action. He turned and lunged at the mirror, determined to smash the glass and sever the curse. The laughter turned to a high-pitched wailing, a desperate plea as he collided with the hard surface. But the glass shimmered and rippled as if it were liquid, pulling him in. Cool fingers, ghostly and thin, closed around his wrist, reeling him in. "You cannot escape," they hissed, an arrangement of mockery and delight, but one thought flashed in his mind, a desperate call they all had to fight back. He needed to collapse the barrier, disrupt their dark games before they feasted on their souls forever. With a jolt, the glass began to crack, spiderwebbing outward, sending a wave of terror through the room. And just like that, a heavy silence fell. The laughter ceased, and everything ground to a halt. What would happen if the glass shattered completely? Would the abyss spill out its horrors into their world, or would it suck them all in? Would they escape or become part of the nightmare forever? The answer loomed in the darkness, a question begging to be answered. The crack spiderwebbed, pulsing with a sinister energy that tasted metallic in the air. Greg felt an electric thrill of hope. He was close. If he could just shatter that mirror and disrupt their hold, maybe they could all escape this twisted game. But whispers swirled around him, thickening like fog, wrapped in vile promises. "Don't you understand? You'll never break free. You belong with us now." The voices poured into his mind, drowning out his determination. Across the street, Paul and Rachel sensed a change in the atmosphere, a weight shifting as if the world itself was holding its breath. The twisted figure mimicking Paul crouched low, a grotesque reflection that seemed to pulse with anticipation. Its grin widened, revealing sharp, jagged teeth that glistened ominously. "We can help you. We can play too." It cackled, echoing Rachel's terrified thoughts. She stammered backward, pulling Paul with her as they stumbled toward the door, but it felt as if they were wading through water, each step a struggle against an unseen force. Paul's mind raced. "We have to find the others. Greg is in there, he needs us." He cursed under his breath, unwilling to give in to the shadows looming in their periphery. With trembling hands, Rachel grabbed the doorknob. "But if we go in, what if they come after us too?" A single tear rolled down her cheek, twisted by the conflict of wanting to protect Greg while fearing what it truly meant to face the mirror. On the other side of the street, Greg slammed his fists against the mirror's surface, desperation now coursing through his veins like fire. "I want to let you take us," he screamed, the sound resonating back at him, isolated in the chilling silence. The crack splintered further, sending shards of light bursting forth like the sun's rays. But the laughter returned, louder this time, sinister and mocking. "You'll never escape, you'll never wake up." The shadows danced, threatening to consume him. Greg closed his eyes, focusing on the tether that still held his friends outside. As the glass trembled, a sudden sharp pain shot through his wrist. The ghostly fingers squeezed tighter, pulling him closer to the edge of oblivion. "Join us," they hissed. The pull was overwhelming, a magnetic force stripping away his resolve, and for a fleeting second, Greg felt himself giving in. Suddenly, the door behind Paul and Rachel burst open with a violent crash. Jenna, wild-eyed and determined, rushed in, clutching an old, rusted lantern. The dim light flickered as she entered, illuminating the doorway as shadows screamed in protest. "Paul! Rachel! We can't go in there alone!" she shouted, courage flickering in her eyes. "Jenna, wait!" Rachel cried, but it was too late. Jenna charged forward, the lantern swinging, creating a pulsating glow that momentarily pushed the darkness away. She thrust the lantern toward the mirror. "We have to fight together." In that split moment, the reflection in the mirror jolted violently. The children recoiled, their laughter replaced with furious snarls, faces twisting as they were scorched by the light. Greg seized the chance, using the surge of courage from his friends to push even harder against the mirror. "Together, we can break the curse." His voice rang out, powerful and fierce. The glass began to convulse violently, sending shards flying in all directions. But as the mirror threatened to shatter completely, a chilling voice echoed deep from its depths, "You think you can escape a promise made in shadows?" And just like that, the atmosphere thickened again, a heavy silence settling, wrapping around them like a suffocating blanket. They all felt the fear crawl up their spines, whispering doubts. Were they truly safe? One final push was coming, but at what cost? As the glass trembled on the edge of shattering, they all had to decide, would they reach for freedom amidst the chaos or cling to the darkness beckoning them closer? The question loomed large as shadows began to solidify around them, ready to strike again. Would they find the strength they needed, or would they become just another story? Lost in the mirror's haunting void? The mirror shook, shards slicing through the air like retribution. Greg stood frozen, adrenaline coursing through him, each heartbeat echoed in his ears. Everywhere he looked, shadows gathered, malignant tendrils stretching, ready to ensnare him. But he could feel his friends, their determination mingling with his desperation. In that moment, they were the light. Keep pushing. Jenna's voice broke through the growing silence, more solid than any fear. The beam from her lantern flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced like spirits trying to escape their confines. The laughter from the mirror resonated sinister and chaotic. You think light can save you? We're waiting here. Just take a step. Rachel, still shivering, gripped Paul's arm tighter. What if we fail? What if this is a trap? Her eyes darted towards the swirling darkness, the twisted reflections mocking them. We can't be scared now. Paul shot back, his voice rising over the cacophony. If we give in, they win. We're stronger together. Remember why we're here. Greg opened his eyes, drawing in a breath that seared his lungs. Right. We're here for each other. With every ounce of will they had left, all four of them leaned into the mirror. The fractures glimmered with a fierce light, the room vibrating with their collective energy. Suddenly, a piercing scream sliced through the tension, a scream that was both familiar and foreign, echoing from within the mirror's depths. Help me. It was an unmistakable voice, one they all recognized. And in that moment, hope danced dangerously close to despair. It's my sister, Jenna whispered, her tone stricken. She's trapped. We have to save her. The moment hung heavily in the air, the flickering lantern casting erratic shadows that whispered. One of you must stay. One for all. The voice hissed again, rich with malice. Greg felt a wave of pain crash over him. The thought of anyone being left behind tore at him, and a surge of fury ignited within. No one is getting left behind, he shouted defiantly, the strength in his voice surprising even him. The shadows recoiled, the faces within them roaring with raw anger. Foolish children. You know nothing of bondage. But as they screamed, the mirror's surface rippled violently, splintering into 1,000 pieces of glass, each catching fragments of light. Jenna held the lantern high, illuminating the fragments like stars in a fractured sky. Together, we can break the chains. Rachel cried, her voice a beacon igniting courage. They pressed forward, their bodies colliding with an almost magnetic force against the mirror. As they pushed deeper, tendrils of darkness lashed out, grazing their skin and biting at their resolve. No! The reflection of twisted Paul lunged, but Greg roared back, you're not real. We won't let you take us. A blinding light erupted from the lantern, the shadows shrieked, twisting and turning, writhing in agony. The darkness began to falter, revealing glimpses of countless faces trapped within its heart. Greg gasped, recognizing some children lost in timeless torment. Break through. Now! Paul shouted, the energy sparking around them. As1, they lunged forward, fists raised, and collided with the mirror. The instant their skin touched the surface, a violent shockwave erupted, sending them sprawling backward into the street. The mirror shattered and imploded under the force of their unity, scattering pieces of glass into the night like fireworks, each flash momentarily illuminating the lingering shadows behind. But as the light faded, a new weight settled in the air. Do you think it ends like this? The voice echoed, primal and chilling. You've only awakened the real darkness. They all looked at each other, hearts thudding. They were free from the mirror, but the laughter lingered, taunting them. Had they truly escaped, or was this just the beginning of something more sinister? an unsettling realization washed over Greg. What if it follows us now? He whispered, dread creeping up his spine. Just as they reeled from the thought, a shadow peeled away from the darkness, coiling back toward the remnants of the mirror. Something more tangible than before was emerging, and somewhere, deep within, a familiar voice called out once more. The ground trembled beneath them as the shadow solidified, its edges curling under the pale moonlight. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It morphed into a figure, cloaked in darkness, with eyes glowing like embers teasing the edge of a firestorm. Greg's heart raced. He could feel the air around them growing heavier, thick with a presence that didn't belong in their world. Stick together! Rachel shouted, tearing herself away from the horror unfolding before them. The urgency in her voice resonated deep, but her hands shook. The lantern flickered, illuminating the shifting darkness. What do we do? Jenna's voice became fragile as the weight of dread bore down on her. We thought we were free. How can we fight this? The figure laughed, a sound cold enough to freeze their insides. You think you've shattered the mirror? I am the keeper of all that you fled. You only delayed your fate. It took a step forward, and the ground seemed to sigh a mournful gasp. They backed away, but the shadows slinked closer, wrapping around their ankles like icy fingers. Greg swallowed hard, desperation clawing at his throat. We can't let it take us. We've already lost too much. As panic set in, Paul shot a glance at the pieces of the shattered mirror littering the street. The light. Maybe it can still protect us. He pointed toward the remnants reflecting the moonlight, each shard still whispering of hope. Together, Greg commanded, the fire igniting once more within him. We have to use the light to stand against the darkness. They formed a circle, pulling the lantern closer. Jenna's hands trembled as she cradled it, eyes set on the shimmering shards. We can amplify the light with these. With a sudden collective surge of determination, they snatched pieces of glass from the ground, each chunk radiating courage. They arranged them around the lantern, constructing a barrier against the shadow. The cloaked figure sneered, shadows swirling dangerously. Foolish children. You think simple reflections can guard your souls? The laughter turned deeper, more haunting, vibrating in their bones, but as the light intensified, the moment shifted. The shadows hesitated. The glowing shards wrestled between the dark and the light, flickering like stars battling the night sky. Now! Focus! Paul commanded, the development urging them to raise their hands, directing the light toward the figure that had dared approach them. The glow grew, casting an ethereal realm around them, the brightness challenging the encroaching darkness. A scream erupted from the figure, the agony reverberating through the night as it recoiled. You cannot keep me at bay forever. It shrieked, its voice cracks, a desperate plea disguised as anger. They pressed forward, feeling empowered by their proximity to one another, the connection more tangible than the shadows trying to devour them. We're stronger together. Greg shouted, believing every word. The shards reflected in their eyes, igniting the determination within. Suddenly, Jenna spotted something amidst the glow. Look! The mirror! In the midst of their burgeoning power, fragments began to float, twitching between dimensions. They swirled around the menacing figure, like moths drawn to a flame, ready to consume it, yet, as hope shimmered, so did doubt intrude. What if we lose control? Rachel's voice quavered, uncertainty seeping back. Trust yourselves. Greg urged, the heat of resolve fueling him, but just as the shadows began to unravel, a twisting force surged through them, pulling them into an unseen chasm. The light flickered violently, and their grip on each other started to weaken. Hold on. Hold on. He cried out, but one by one, they felt hands slipping away into the darkness. Fear clutched at Greg's heart that in the chaos, amidst screams and fractured light, he glimpsed a familiar figure struggling. One of them was falling. The fleeting moment was enough to freeze time for him. Greg! Jenna's desperate voice cut through the haze, eyes wide with terror as they reached for her. "Fight it! Don't let go!" he shouted, but the darkness coiled around her. The shadows surged, swallowing her screams, and suddenly they were left with only the darkness echoing, mocking their unity. "You're not done yet, children. The real nightmare begins now." Greg stood paralyzed, heart shattered. What just happened? He gasped, sweat trickling down his brow, but before they could process the loss, something stirred within the dark. A silhouette, too familiar and yet twisted beyond recognition, emerged from the void. They all recoiled, faces frozen in horror, and in that moment, with shadows clawing at their backs, a voice they all feared yet missed called out again. "Help me if you dare!" The question loomed palpably in the air. Would they dare to confront both the terror and the truth of what lay ahead? The air thickened with tension, a suffocating fog that wrapped around them like a predator. Greg's pulse raced, the dreamlike state of losing Jenna sending shocking echoes through his mind. The familiarity of the shadowy figure before them churned his stomach, its form unsettling and warped. Memories flickered like candle flames, illuminated by the dread still lingering from their past encounters. Who are you?" Rachel's voice, hardly above a whisper, quivered in the dark like a bird pinned beneath a weight. The figure stepped closer, the shadows rippling as if animated by an unseen energy. "Who I was doesn't matter anymore," it rasped, lips curling into a twisted smile that made his blood run cold. "What matters is who you will become, if you dare face me." "Stay back!" Paul shouted, stepping between his friends and the horror before them, but he knew how empty the threat sounded in the face of such overwhelming darkness. Each breath felt like shards of ice in his chest, suffocating the fire within him. "Jenna's gone. You took her!" Greg screamed, his anger pulsating. "You're not winning this time." The figure laughed softly, a sound devoid of warmth, echoing as if the recesses of the earth had opened to join in. "She was merely the first. You can't save anyone when your hearts already tremble in fear. But, oh, how deliciously naive dare you believe they could escape me." With every word, they felt the shadows crawling closer, tangling with their thoughts, igniting an oily fear that threatened to consume them whole. "Think, Greg. We can't let it dig into our minds." Rachel shouted, eyes darting between the flickering light of the lantern and the now looming darkness. "Then we need to make a choice to fight with every ounce we have," he replied, the promise of resolve building in his voice. They needed to transform fear into power, light into weaponry. "Break the shards," Paul suggested suddenly, desperation clawing at his throat. "We're still holding on to them. Use what we have." And just like that, it crystallized. They stepped closer, gathering the remaining pieces of the mirror's reflection, each shard now resonating with adrenaline and grief. Greg felt a spark igniting, his heart pounding louder as hope edged into the chasm of despair. As they held the shards aloft, the shadows hesitated, barely flickering. "You think that can protect you?" The figure spat, rage heightening its presence and driving the very ground beneath them to tremble. "Yes," Greg shouted, newfound ferocity surging within him. "We'll take every glimpse of light you think you extinguished." Together they swung the shards towards the figure, channels of eerie light piercing the encroaching shadows. The silhouette writhed, swirls of despair entwining with oily darkness spiraling away. But as they pressed on, the air filled with tension, whether from their growing confidence or the figure stirring into fury. "Fools! Your beliefs will haunt you," it screeched, claws extending as tendrils of shadow erupted from its body, lashing out. They braced themselves. The light grew stronger, pushing back the cold tendrils, but the shadows retaliated, intertwining around their ankles, threatening to drag them into the depths of despair. Gripping tighter to each other, the four formed a barricade of unity. "Focus on Jenna. We'll bring her back," Rachel yelled, each word a battle cry, igniting their collective will to save their friend and stand against the suffocating darkness. Just then, an eerie wail echoed through the night, scratching at the inside of their minds. "Help, Me, the voice was unmistakable. It was Jenna. Keep pushing, Greg urged, eyes blazing with defiance. But the chilling realization swept over them that saving her wouldn't come without consequence. In that precarious moment, Greg felt a rift opening around them, a booming rattle that rang in their ears. He met the eyes of his friends, the determination reflecting back, but the shadows were wrestling too, holding secrets and whispers they weren't ready to face. Do you believe you can stand against the tide? The figure taunted, grinning wider. You don't know, do you? She isn't the only one in danger. The shadows pulsed, the weight driving into their hearts as Jenna's haunting call echoed louder, tethering their fears to hope. As the figure laughed, a new realization dawned. What they thought they were fighting was only the beginning. The true horror was still waiting, waiting to be unleashed. Would they find the strength to uncover what lay beneath the surface? Or would the darkness consume everything they held dear? The echo of Jenna's voice shattered the stillness, spiraling through the air, a lifeline entwined with desperation. Greg steadied himself, lungs burning as fresh resolve surged within him. We're coming for you, Jenna. We won't leave you. The figure's mocking laughter shrieked through the thick fog of despair. Shadows clawed at their legs, relentless tendrils praying for their strength to wane. Yet, together, they stood their ground, a shield forged in unity, embers of hope ignited in the depths of their hearts. Paul felt a spark ignite, a remembrance of their shared experiences, the moments laced with laughter, warmth, and friendship. Think, what can we do to fight back? He gazed into Greg's determined eyes. We have to turn their power against them. Use the shards, Rachel urged, shaking with adrenaline as she thrust her sharp piece toward the looming figure. They're more than reflections. They're our memories, our strength. With every breath, they envisioned Jenna's smile, the sound of their laughter echoing in their minds, wielding those memories as weapons against the shadows encroaching upon them. Together, Greg shouted, the word a battle cry that sent shivers racing down their spines. The energy around them crackled, vibrant, warm, pushing back the creeping darkness. The shards, glimmering like stars reborn, radiated brilliance that cut through the malevolence. Foolish children. The shadow snarled, but they pressed on, defiance fueling their hearts. With one sweeping motion, they hurled the shards at the figure. You don't own us, Greg yelled, each glimmer a testament to their courage, each sharp fragment a memory brimming with love. The air exploded with light, an empowerment that screamed through the night. The figure writhed and twisted, the light slicing through its form, flickering with a frantic energy. You think you can save her? You shall pay the price. It howled, but they didn't waver, they only pushed harder. The shadows retreated, revealing familiar faces trapped within a visual of lost souls held prisoner by the darkness. There among them, pale and pleading, was Jenna. Her eyes flickered with a mixture of relief and fear, but the moment was fleeting. She was still consumed by shadows. Jenna! They cried in unison, the sound igniting more strength, more power. We will bring you home. The darkness screamed, its form shimmering and distorting, a desperation born from the energy amplifying in the hearts of those who fought it. You think you're heroes? You're merely pawns. It bellowed, clawing at the ground, trying to anchor itself amidst the powerful light. I'm not afraid of you, Greg shouted, fists clenched tightly around his shard, his voice roaring with defiance. We define our fate. With a swift motion, Greg lunged forward, the shards bursting into flames, crystallizing into a blinding orb of light. The shadows recoiled, biting back in fear, stunning them momentarily. Hold on, Paul urged, as the shimmering orb enveloped them, casting out the darkness. Every lingering doubt began to evaporate, filling the air with an intoxicating sense of unity, weaving their resolve into something greater. Then, just as quickly, the light erupted into a powerful wave. The laughter of the shadows morphed into anguished howls as the shadows collapsed, swirling violently before dispersing into nothingness. The ground shook beneath them. Jenna! Rachel screamed as they felt the tremors, hope dancing dangerously as the visage of their friend flickered back and forth. "It's south, so close," Jenna begged, hands reaching out, her form fleeting in and out of reality. "You have to finish it." The fragmented shards of glass whirled around them, shards of memories intertwined with their desperation and hope. The remaining energy surged as they pressed their palms together, pooling power into one final explosion. "Now!" Greg shouted, and they thrust their collective will into the light. Raw power launched towards Jenna, intertwining with the essence of the shards and wrapping around her. The darkness screamed, its grip fracturing under the weight of their unity. With a sound like 1,000 shattering mirrors, the darkness dissolved into light. In the blink of an eye, Jenna broke free, gasping as she was swept into the embrace of her friends. "You did it!" she exclaimed, breathless and radiant. But the celebration was short-lived. The ground trembled once more as a voice echoed, colder than before. "This isn't the end." The friends turned to face the remnants of the shattered mirror, blackened and twisted, feeding on their fear. Frigid air crept in, suffocating. "We cannot let this evil linger. It'll return, we have to seal it," Greg urged, heart racing. "Let us gather what's left and trap it," Rachel declared, determination sparking anew within them. They worked swiftly, gathering the shards, flickering remnants of their fight, piecing them together in a tight circle formed around the remnants of the evil they defeated. "Together," Greg said, gripping Jenna's hand fiercely, willing her to believe. As they clasped their hands in unity, they channeled a final burst of light into the assembly of shards, weaving their hopes into something indelible. It shimmered, an eternal promise of protection. Never again, they breathed together, sealing the darkness within the confinement of shattered glass. A powerful illumination grew, a protective barrier pulsing with the strength of their friendship. The shadows screamed and recoiled, grasping at the fading remains of their dark domain, vanishing into the void as the shards turned opaque, their glow enveloping Willow Creek. As calm returned, the friends stepped back, hearts thudding in unison. They had emerged from the nightmare, but the bond that had been forged would hold them together against whatever horrors still loomed beyond the veil. In that hush, they looked at one another, breathing deeply. Their laughter rang confidently through the night, echoing the strength found in unity. Realization finally dawning, they could face anything together, and deep down, in the dark corners of the universe, silence fell, one promise echoing through the cosmos: "We will be ready for you." Now, you need to subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss out on the next exclusive stories that'll keep you at the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us grow the community. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this thrilling conclusion, because your voice matters. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this or experience the chills for themselves. Join us as we dive into more incredible tales. Your support makes all the difference.